Hello, all you hardcores out there. How are you doing? It's Russ here from Poker's Corner, biggest gob in sport. Today I'm joined by Julian. How are you doing, Julian?
I'm all good, Russell. How's yourself?
All right, mate. You've been watching Leeds United?
No, I don't watch football, mate. I think I last watched a football game about 35 years ago.
They've gone down, haven't they?
Yeah, Anna told me she's from Leeds, so she said they'd gone down. So I'm not an expert at all. But what I do know is to survive in the Premiership, you need a massive amount of money, don't you?
You know what I mean? You know this big Sam Allardyce. He's like the go-to guy, to rescue people. At back end of the season, isn't he?
I know he is, yeah.
He just took two teams down, hasn't he? Right? He's not this go-to guy. He's never won anything. Right? What has he won him? He's not won anything. And it's like Gareth Southgate. He's not won anything, but they're getting rewarded for failure, aren't they, these people? Is that what society we're living in now?
It seems to be. I mean, like I say, I don't really watch football as such, but I'm aware of what goes on. We got to the semi-finals in one, and the final in was it in Euro, whatever it was. But I'd comment on football, but I just get laughed at because I don't know enough about it. But ultimately, we do celebrate almost winners, don't we? And I'm not suggesting that that England aren't a good team or whatever, but I don't know. It's just the hero's welcome that we have, and we did it with Frank Bruno, didn't we? Frank Bruno was a national institution, and there
Eddie
was
the
a
Eagle.
Eddie the Eagle who literally, I think when Eddie the Eagle used to do his jumps, I think his distance was half what the actual gold medalist got, and we think it's funny, don't we? But we do have some tremendous sort of athletes, and it's almost like I know he had the tough decision against Jack Catterall, but always back to boxing, of course. But Josh Taylor just turned into this figure that was hated, and he was undisputed champion. He was just a phenomenal fighter who would fight anybody. And Josh Taylor, everybody turned against him. I think we like to do that. Maybe we like a loser. Maybe we don't like an unpopular winner. I don't know.
My argument is this, though, right? Why is that Sam Allardyce picking millions up when he was on take when he is England manager? They caught him in a sting, didn't they? You know what I mean?
People like big personalities, don't they? And it's like we always talk about folklore, don't they? People get these reputations of folklore based on nothing, actually. They're
How
based
how he
on
nearly, how he nearly pulled off a job, a prestigious job like Leeds United. Him, Big Dosser, Big Sam.
well, they've gone down, haven't they? So
Unbelievable. Multi-millionaire worth 60 odd million. For doing what? What has Mark Hughes won as a manager? He's another one. The milked it, all of them. Redknapp, what has he won? An FA Cup. They're not Fergie, are they? Or Don Revie or Shankly, Clough, them, are
no,
they?
no. I mean, like say Alex Ferguson is probably the most successful, you know, manager ever.
There were characters then, though, weren't they? Alex Ferguson, the Doc, Tommy Docherty,
Well, what
Fluffy.
I always remember the story about David Beckham, and he basically says there's no players bigger than the team, and they had a bit of a back and forth. It was out you go, and I think there's something in that. These guys have got massive egos. They've got. I think football started it, and boxing's very very close now. We've got agents, haven't they? Got all these agents
Yeah.
who don't allow this and they don't allow that. And then, trainers and coaches and managers can't even get close to footballers or fighters because you've got these agents who are just advising them on, which hand to use when you go to the toilet. It's embarrassing, mate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Embarrassing.
Malcolm Allinson, he was a character, wasn't he? Remember him?
I just like I said, I don't follow it, but I've known Brian Clough because my dad always talked about Brian Clough, and then so I've like you do, you go on YouTube and you watch all this stuff about Cloughie and stuff. So hell of a personality.
Peter Swales, Man City chairman with comb over pulled from his sideburns, doing an Eddie Hearn.
I'll tell you, the last football team I used to watch this is how long ago I watched soccer, mate, was Tottenham in the 80s when they won the FA Cup and they got Ardiles.
Ricky Villa,
Yeah, they got, I even forget. And then
Glenn Hoddle.
I used to follow Watford, and I used to just follow them, not support them. Not an amateur sport. I'd follow Watford and Luther Blissett, John Barnes, Sherwood Goals, guys like that, and that is. So I'm probably mentioning names that you're younger.
Remember that chip Glenn Hoddle did against Watford over was that Steve Sher? I forget it now. She went straight over his head. Chipped it.
He could pass the ball as well, couldn't he?
Imagine him now. What would he be worth now, Glenn Hoddle? You build a team around him, wouldn't you now?
But that's the thing now. It's like any sport now. You look at the money, what's involved in some of those footballers, and we're talking last session you and I did. I talk about my dad who worked out pit with good rugby players, but they worked out pit. You know, there's no sponsors, there's no this, no that. They've been out pit and then they train twice a week and play on a Saturday. And they must be looking back now thinking, oh, I mean, football is a non-contact sport, isn't it? Which is another reason I can't watch it, is they get touched and they're rolling around on the floor like they've been shot. And I'm like, I can't watch this.
Could you imagine if Spurs had kept Souness and they've had Souness and Hoddle in middle? You know, in the 70s when Liverpool were in
I remember him, yeah, with Ricardo Villa and Ozzy Ardiles, and they did the song, didn't they, in the charts? Spurs are on the way to Wembley, wherever it was. I remember it, mate.
I used to get up for them FA Cup mornings, you know, like a big event in our house, you know, all day watching it. The teams arriving and that.
In fact, people might laugh because, again, it's not
the magic of the cup.
The best team I ever saw, and I saw the opening game in the World Cup, were 1982 Brazil.
Yeah.
So they got Zico, Junior, Socrates.
Brian Robson scored early for England in '82, didn't he, Robbo?
He never did a full game, did he, Robson? Wasn't he always off with an injury or something?
Yeah, but in '82 he scored early, didn't he, for England, Robbo? I'm sure he did. Robbo. I think he got injured in '86, didn't he, Robbo? He did his arm, didn't he, in Mexico? I think I might be wrong there, but
it was. I remember it was a scorcher over there, wasn't it? But yeah.
Anyway, moving on from football because they don't care about boxing fans, do they? Bricktop on IFL, seconds out. He's come out spitting facts. He's there with his big magnifying glass on table. You know, the magnifying glasses that he probably has, so he don't end up breaching his own contract. You know, reading the whole print. I've actually seen a Bricktop contract. Woo.
Yeah.
This is a normal contract. This is what you need to know.
And this is our
this is a Bricktop one. I'll be there all day reading that one.
Try and get out of it.
Yeah, exactly. Bricktop's been sent an offer from Eddie Hills for
AJ
Fury and September 2nd. Fury and Joshua. So you tell me, what is that? Just lip service, or who do we believe here? They're all sending contracts. Is a tweet a contract now? Is it?
Well, I'll tell you.
Is it binding, or is it an Instagram? Something, because at the same time he sent contracts, but is it what is it? Once he's sent on social media or something?
It doesn't mean jack, does it? Ultimately, right?
Are these classed as offers?
I'll tell you where I'm at with it all, and it changes by the week. It's like a soap opera. Who do I, instead of saying who would I believe, because you always say if you line up against the wall, who would you believe? The best way of me.
Bricktop sent them an offer. So
yeah, the best way to respond to what you just said is who do I least believe? So if you've got the players and you've got Fury, Joshua, Eddie Hearn, Frank Warren, Bob Arum, who do I least believe out of that group? Tyson Fury. It is
any of them. I mean, they're all covering up for everybody. It's all like muddled up. Nobody knows what to say on here. I mean, there's a lot of fake stuff about it. It's all confusing. It's come out and said that there's something on the table for September 2nd. They can't work together, can they? Obviously.
No.
We're going to do one to 2 years ago, but we're further away now doing with them working together now than ever, aren't we now? You mind all this, his lad George, who seems pretty clean cut and keeps his out of all nonsense, doesn't he? You'd probably believe him, wouldn't you? He's probably embarrassed by all that. He's Warren's lad, isn't he? Because he seems to be sensible one, doesn't he, in all this?
But listen, who's got the biggest name? So they'll debate that forever. All right, Fury's got the the belts.
Who
And
cares? They're getting millions, aren't they, Julian?
they care because it's concessions, isn't it? It's like, you know, people always want to think they're getting one over on somebody else. So it's not just the egos in the ring, it's the egos outside of the ring, and it's the extended egos of all these people involved in the sport. So nobody wants to give ground, right? It's like, you know, they'd rather get 80% of a small number than 20% of a big number because it damages their ego. And, you know, Eddie's saying it's not about the belts. Well, you watch Tyson Fury and Usyk. If their belts get splintered, which at some point they will do, you watch Eddie start.
Coming, innit? It's coming, that, innit?
Yeah. We're going to be further away from unification than ever. So once the belts get splintered, Eddie don't care about belts. You watch him scramble for a WBO belt for AJ against somebody. So they'll all scramble for the belts.
Then we're back to 2003, aren't we?
Yeah, we're back to where we started, but where are we right now?
20-year back.
Look, can you categorically say who the best heavyweight in the world is? You can't categorically say
it's one or two, isn't it? Usyk or Fury, isn't it?
But that doesn't. That's my point. We don't have a. I think Fury beats him. It's irrelevant, right? There's enough people and enough doubt out there to say actually we've got one or the other. So we don't have a dominant heavyweight champion of the world. That's a statement of fact. Tyson Fury's made 3 defenses since he beat Klitschko. Obviously had a retirement. That's a statement of fact. 3 defenses in 7 years. Anthony Joshua has won 3 of his last 6 and only scored 1 KO against a 39-year-old man in the last 4 years. That's a statement of fact. These are all statements of facts. Deontay Wilder has scored 1 KO in his last 2 or 3 years against, it was a cracking right hand, by the way. These are all statements of facts. So until we've got a clear-cut heavyweight champion of the world, we are where we are. We're in a mess. It's boring, mate. It makes me want to go to sleep. We're in a mess. And you get to the stage, I don't care. We're talking about it because we care about boxing. But I wouldn't, you know, if Tyson Fury fought Anthony Joshua, there's a part of me which is unpopular now because I've always been a Fury. I'm not a fanatic. I've always liked Fury. I've always preferred Fury over Joshua. But there's a part of me now what I'd like to see AJ do him. If I'm just being honest, I don't know why. I just would because I think he needs a defeat on his record. Does Tyson to test his hunger and to test his love for the sport and to see if he is the greatest heavyweight who's ever lived and see if he can come back like Ali did when he got beat. There's a part of me wants to see Tyson Fury beat. There's a part of me wants to see AJ get sparked by Wilder purely because he's done then, isn't he? He can go away and Eddie can stop talking about heavyweights.
Just after all nonsense that they've spouted for this last 10 years.
Yeah. It's the spiteful side of me.
And we've said it in, and they've manoeuvred him. Your Pulevs, your Povetkins, your Vladimirs, your Eric Melinas, your Brazils. Do you know what I mean? Kind of things.
Everybody they've got has either been no good or they've got them at the right time.
You know, your Parkers or your Ruizers, and they come a copper there, didn't it, with Ruiz?
They just thought they'd got a little fat guy who hadn't trained, didn't they? They didn't know that Ruiz.
And then they thought we've got Usyk. He's a small man who'll struggle with Chisora in their heads because Tony Bellew was screaming it from the rafters. No, Derek beat him. And unfortunately, probably give Joshua false hope, didn't it?
And this is the thing, Russell. Unfortunately, right, because boxing's, I don't people think this is an outlandish statement. So you know, I rate Jared Anderson. I think he looks pretty good, right? But Jared Anderson won't ever be able to do what Mike Tyson did. I know they've got different styles and the different fighters, but Jared Anderson won't ever do what Tyson did, right? Mike Tyson, because you'll never be able to fight that frequent. You'll never go into unification and be able to clean up because boxing's too political this day and age. But part of me wants a young fighter like Jared Anderson to come in, terrify these lot, clean them out and get rid of the junk, because that's what Larry Holmes were coming towards the end when Mike Tyson came in. And what we'd got, even though we love the heavyweights, we'd got fighters who weren't dedicated. You know, we got Pages, Tuckers, Tubbs, Pinky Thomas, Berbick, and Tyson cleaned them out. And I'd love a young heavyweight like Anderson or somebody else to just come through and clean this entitled bunch of
Yeah, but it
heavyweights.
takes forever to clean them out because they're only
That's the
fighting once
problem.
every
Yeah,
10 months.
that's the problem.
Larry
Tyson
Holmes were fighting
unified.
4 times a year, Harley, and people like they're fighting once every 10 months. It's a joke.
This is the problem. And Tyson unified in 3 or 4 fights. It was done. But this won't ever happen again. But I just want someone to just clean them out, get rid of the old guard, spit or get off the pot. They've been talking for long enough now. AJ, Fury, all of you've held that division to ransom for long enough. And I want them all to get beat, if I'm being completely honest. And I want some young kids to come along and just get rid of them. I mean, that's a pipe dream, of course.
Usyk's signed with
Saudis, yeah.
Saudis now, so them belts are tied up now, aren't they?
I'm just going to say, there's two ways to look at that. One, it's a firm commitment because he wants to definitely go the unification. Or two, it's more red tape and it means that no one can touch him and they'll just pivot him as however they want to pivot him.
They'll have him out there just flag for their country, won't they? Because Joshua's a busted flush now, isn't he?
Well, sadly with Usyk, he's a fighter without a home, isn't he? He's never going to be able to fight in his home country. So if he can fight over there, fine. But who's he going to get? I mean, he's got the Dubois fight. That's a fight I don't think will happen, by the way. Even though they've got a date, they put a date back to whenever it is. Some fights you just think you messes. Dubois and those guys, you messes, and I don't think that fight will happen. Just an instinct.
Yeah. Do you think fans are being misled by all this calling out? I mean, in the last 20 days, we've had Dempsey McKean, now Ergovic, Zang, Joyce, John Jones, the UFC guy, Harold Miller, Joyce, Parker, Ruiz, Wilder 4, and Garno. Do they have to bring one out every couple of days? And then everybody's in a tailspin. Is this way to treat fans? Tyson, I want about him. Tyson.
Social media has got a lot to answer for in many, many ways, but you never had this, did you? I'm always harking back. Who cares, right? If you pre-online, early days of Lennox Lewis, Larry Holmes, whatever, you just read in the Daily Star, Larry Holmes is fine, Leroy Jones in Vegas, it was done. And then you just watched it. There were no pullouts. Will this happen? Won't that happen? We haven't got a venue yet. We're 90% there before we do Larry Holmes' next defense. We're 95% there. I'm going to announce it in the next 24 hours. It was just done. It was simple. You watched it, you moved on. And what we have now is like I say, you've just listed about 8 or 9 names, right? And we're in June. So remember, June's a big month because
11 names there.
Oh, how did Conor Benn get on last night, by the way? I'm just looking, it's the 4th of June. So Conor Benn were fighting the 3rd of June, wasn't he? How did he get on? Does anyone know the result of Conor Benn?
Benn didn't fight.
Oh, did he not fight? Or did they move it to the 17th? Not been much about that, has there?
Well, it keeps getting moved every 3 weeks, doesn't it?
Oh, okay. Right, anyway, clearly I'm being facetious, but it's all we hear about is who's going to fight who. So we're in June, 4th of June. And there's no date for Tyson Fury. So what we've had since Dillian White, which wasn't mandatory a year ago, was it a year ago? We've had Derek Chisora in 1 year. And there was no fight scheduled. There's no scheduled fight for Anthony Joshua. There's no scheduled fight for Wilder. And there's no scheduled fight for Tyson Fury. So that's where we're at right now. Right? None of those fights are scheduled. We just got Usyk, who's got Dubois, and like I've said, I'm not convinced about that fight, but hopefully he will fight. So it's just taking the proverbial from the fans. It's laughing at the fans, actually. It's laughing and mocking the fans because it's saying, do you know what? You mugs, you believe this. You believe everything that you're told. And that's where you and I get a lot of these emails, etc., because you don't believe it. You don't believe any of this stuff. I don't believe any of this, and I never have done. I've always thought it was garbage, absolute rubbish. I don't believe it until they're in the ring. So,
what do you think would happen if Tyson fought John Jones to see who's baddest man on planet? Because Dana White's put a statement out, and he had a presser, and said he's willing to put the money up for Fury to go in Octagon.
it's as simple as this, right? And this has always been my debate. I'm a boxing fan, right? But if you're a boxer, you don't call out an MMA guy and say it's under boxing rules because that's ridiculous. If you are the baddest man on the planet, and Tyson Fury, I'm sure, thinks he is, then why don't you sign a contract and do it two ways? One in a ring under your rules, and once in the octagon under MMA rules. Just do that. That for me would be a fair way of doing it. Whatever you say about Clarissa Shields, she stepped in the octagon. She had a go. She said, "I'm the baddest woman on the planet."
She won last night, Clarissa Shields, on points.
She did, yeah, and she went in the octagon. I think she went 1-on-1 or something. If to answer your question, there's probably any top 10 or 15, heavyweights, light heavyweights would beat Fury within a matter of 15, 20 seconds. It's just they're no fights. They're not fights.
Well, a bit same in boxing, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, it's one sport. It's another sport. You got Federer doesn't play badminton, does he? You put Federer against the world badminton champion. Just
Kevin Peterson don't play baseball. He couldn't do what Barry Bonds does.
The different sports, the different sports. It's just it proves that. And anybody who's watching this now says, "Oh, but what about when this happened and Ray Mercer knocked out an MMA guy?" Tim said, "Well, it's about picking out old men here, there, and everywhere. You get a prime boxer against a prime, like Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor in the cage against Floyd Mayweather. It'd be ridiculous, wouldn't it?
It'd be what?
Floyd Mayweather against Conor McGregor in an MMA fight. It'd be ridiculous. It wouldn't last 20 seconds. He
didn't want to do it, Mayweather. He just wanted to do it in ring, didn't he? He didn't want to.
And Conor McGregor got paid massively, so good for Conor McGregor. But
going through it, isn't he?
Yeah, Tyson Fury just needs to fight or retire, actually, and I know I get stick over Fury. Every time I say Fury, I say I think he's best of a generation. I think he's the best in the world. I think he beats Usyk. Nobody ever responds to that. The minute you say anything critical about Tyson Fury, you get like a backlash. And I don't think he conducts himself like a champion. I don't think he's got any kind of resume that's going to compare to the greatest heavyweights of all time. And
you include the top 15 in that?
Well, I look at it like this. We have to judge Tyson Fury realistically at the end of his career. I understand that. But the pace he's going at the age he's at, he's not going to get to that kind of he's not going to have another 8, 9, 10 big names on his record, is it? Because there's not enough time to do that.
He needs at least another 5 or 6 names, doesn't he, to even be a mix? But as a GOAT,
I can't see him.
Time's running out for a minute to be a GOAT.
Well, he has been, and against a massive, massive puncher, he's come close to being beaten already, but very, very close by Wilder, just for the sake of a couple of seconds here and there. And it was brilliant how he got up in the first fight in that last round. Was unbelievable. The third fight against Wilder, did Fury survive it, or was Wilder just not a great finisher? I don't know. But yeah, he's not. He's beatable. All fighters are beatable, aren't they? They're all.
I think Usyk will look at Fury and think, "I think I can beat him."
I think Usyk fancies it all day long. I don't think he's got that. Any cruiserweight, and it wasn't the biggest cruiserweight in the world. Any cruiserweight who's not a massive puncher, and Usyk is not a massive puncher, who moves up to fight the big boys, has got balls of steel, mate. Is cut from a different cloth.
Like Holyfield, isn't it? The warrior, isn't
he? Exactly. A mythical thing. This is
Holyfield used to set about them big guys, didn't he? Ripping into them up close, didn't he? In pocket, didn't he?
Oh, it was just like, that he got beaten the first fight with Riddick Bowe, but that fight was unbelievable.
But at the time, I thought Holyfield would never get beat.
I was a big Holyfield fan. I remember when he turned over, didn't he? He got a bronze. He got disqualified. With Kevin Barry knocked out with a punch after the break.
Former trainer, wasn't it?
Yeah, just after the caught him on the break, didn't he? And it was heartbreaking. And I watched all his early fights, and even the ones you didn't see on TV, I used to get tapes of them. And I remember when the fight with Dwight Muhammad Cowie, used to be Dwight Braxton, one of the best 15 rounds you ever seen in your life. and then he beat some good fighters. He beat Tillman and Ricky Parkey and some good cruiserweights he cleaned up, and just a brilliant fighter, mate.
What do you see happening with Zang and Joyce, Julian? Do you think that's a closer fight than they're making out, or do you see the same thing happening?
Well, initially, the results surprised me. It didn't blow me away, but I thought Joyce would beat Zhang just a little bit fresher on that trajectory. But what he's not going to do is he's not going to learn how to block a left cross in the space of 6 months, is he? That's not going to happen.
No.
And I think I can see the same result again. It's sometimes the guy's got your number, and Zhang's just going to throw that now anytime he wants and land anytime he wants. And then what's going to happen when Joyce still gets nailed with that shot? He's just not crafty enough to be able to win another way. You know, like crafty fighters can win 2 or 3 different ways. Joyce will walk through you, or he doesn't beat you. And I don't think he can walk through Zhang, he's a big guy, and he's 20 stone. Big everywhere.
Bricktop's come out and he said that we all got carried away with Joyce, and he's guilty of it as well. What do you think of them comments from Bricktop?
I think it's a fair comment, if I'm being honest, because we did get carried away. And you know what part of that was? And I was guilty of this. I always hold my hands up and say guilty. Really early days, you can ask anybody who, you know, I've said on social media, me and Ben used to do stuff on Facebook. I thought Joyce was horrible. I thought it was horrible. I'm like, oh my God, this is low level stuff. I know he was an Olympian, and I thought it was horrible. And then he warmed to me. He kind of grew on me when he beat Dubois. But you get carried away, and I'll tell you why we get carried away.
Well, with his bone density strength and that, like Superman.
Yeah. But do you know why I got carried away? And you might have done the same thing and everybody else. You get so desperate for someone to clean this mess up. But you get so desperate for someone to clean this mess up because they're not fighting each other. Joyce comes along, and you think, oh, he's a breath of fresh air. It was Joyce. You know, I mean, even taking a fight like Zhang, when he could have just sat on his ranking and just waited and fought.
He's got to be given credit for that, Big Joe, hasn't he?
Got to give it. People would say that's stupid. I call that being a competitive athlete. So give him credit for that. But we're just desperate, as I said about Jared Anderson, we're desperate for someone to come along and clean this mess up, because I'll tell you what, this current top 4 heavyweights aren't going to clean it up. So we need someone else to do it. But to unify now, it's not going to happen, is it? You're not going to get a young kid comes through and cleans the division up, because first of all, no one would fight him. Second of all, they'd be tied in contracts and politics and rematch clauses. I mean, imagine some of the great fights we'd have missed out on in history if every single fight had a rematch clause.
This is how I look at it, right? Tyson used to go on about Vladimir packing division up. He used to slate him, but Vladimir fought regular, right? And he had all them defences, beat 20 world champions, or 20 wins over world champions, should I say, and behaved like a champion, didn't he? Impeccable manners. And he didn't park the division up. This division's parked up now, and he's not wanting to fight. Oh, fans want him to fight. And so, in my opinion, he's worse than Vladimir. He's everything that he were against a few years ago.
Well, if you look at Vladimir, you look at when Vladimir beat Povetkin was a formidable fighter.
Undefeated, wasn't he, as well?
Chagayev was a good fighter, was Chagayev, even though I don't like David Hay. David Hay
was free there.
Dangerous heavyweight was David Hay. He was knocking people out for fun. And Vladimir didn't avoid that and ask for too much money. He said, well, let's unify, let's do it. So he beat some not very great fighters, but he beat some. He learned from Brewster and Sanders. Fighters get knocked out, it happens. He learned, and he became very good at what he did. All right, nobody wanted to watch it, and I certainly didn't enjoy watching it, but he became really good at what he did, and he beat fighters when they actually were good fighters, when they were, you know, like I said, Povetkin was a formidable fighter.
Very good. Vladimir was a good fighter at his peak, but he didn't part the division up. He kept it active. I know they fought in Europe and that, and Yanks didn't like it, but they didn't have a star then, Yanks.
You know what else he did? What else he didn't do, Russell? He didn't disgrace the sport of boxing, did he? He didn't embarrass the sport of boxing.
effing and blinding every other day on Instagram or Twitter or whatever he's doing. What does he think? They think people are going to warm to Tyson when he's carrying off like that. He's let his son down, hasn't he?
Nobody wants to see that. All right, it's a man's sport. We all like a bit of rough and ready, but there's a way to conduct yourself. It's like, you know, you've got Javonta Davis right now, a hot youngster. He's in jail, isn't he? You know what I mean? It's like, it's just there's a way to conduct yourself. Tyson Fury is for someone who's a mental health ambassador, and he certainly throws some pretty insulting names around, doesn't he? When it comes to
Mental health ambassador. Well, they forget, don't they? They're not even good liars.
no,
It's Big Freeze. He's fighting Marius Vac shortly, but he's got to knock back out, in my opinion, to get it mixed because he's 32 now. It's Big Freeze, isn't he? 32-year-old Olympic bronze. If he beats Vac in emphatic style, he's 7-0. He's got to kick on now, hasn't he? Because he's not got the worldly fight. They pulled out, haven't they?
it's a very strategic fight. So whenever I see a young fighter, and it's called good matchmaking, and he fights somebody I've heard of and fights somebody who's, you know, boxed at a decent level, I never look at the record. I always go to BoxRec and look at the last 3 years. And if the last 3 years shows me losses and inactivity, then I know that strategically they've picked that guy for a reason. They never pick somebody who's coming off 5 knockout wins. They always pick somebody who's inactive, who's lost at a certain level, because you know the whispers in the gym. You know that guy's not turning up for training. You know he's tipped over in terms of his getting older. What is he, 39? And it's a safe fight for Fraser Clarke, but I still think there's something about him that will probably make hard work of that fight. I said this to you about a year ago, 2 years ago. As a person, as a pundit, I love him. I think he's like so refreshing, but I don't think he's got it to get to that top. He'll never be a top 5 heavyweight, what Fraser Clarke. He's just missing something for me.
What do you reckon it is? His fitness.
I think his fitness is missing the gears. He doesn't have those gears. I don't think he's a massive puncher. He might look like he knocked a couple of big guys over, but I don't think he's a huge puncher. I don't think he's got the gears and the snap. And he fights one way. You know, you watch him all the time and he just throws the same combinations all the time. And
Would it be easy to figure out for Tyson Fury, people like that, and Yui and all them, and
yeah, I'll tell you what I was watching
figure
this.
him out?
Yeah, some fighters you can figure out, and you just fighters have patterns. It happens. And I was watching the Clarissa Shields fight this morning, and I noticed every time she goes clockwise all the time, and every time her opponent went to her right, which is an unusual way of going, Shields would throw one jab, and then she'd throw a double jab, and she'd throw the looping right hand. And every time she looped it, she missed by about 18 inches. And I know you didn't ask me this question, but I was watching it thinking, that's just what Savannah Marshall should have done. I never understood the game plan. It was crazy walking straight to Shields. You don't fight Shields in the pocket. So fighters have patterns. Fraser Clarke's got patterns. Clarissa Shields, I just watched her this morning and I'm like, she's just patterns. She's got really distinct patterns that she does. She does about 4 different things, does Clarissa Shields, and she does them in a different order. And lots of fighters do that. You know, I noticed I'll give you an example. So when Sykes fought Crawler, when we were getting ready for that fight, that was the eliminator for the final eliminator for British Super Featherweight Championship in 2009. I watched Crawler, studied him like you do. Watch him. And Crawler never threw a combination without throwing a jab. So what I mean by that is some fighters will step in and they'll throw a right hand or a lead left hook. They'll start a combination without throwing a jab. So we knew every time Crawler throws a jab, it's because he wasn't confident his feet were in range. So if he missed with a jab, instead of stepping in and throwing a right hand left hook, he'd step in again and throw another jab. And it says he has to start everything with a jab. That's his comfort blanket. That's his security blanket.
Is that where you sort of game plan out to beat Crawler? Because you beat Crawler twice, didn't you?
Yeah, and we just knew, and we just. I said that's what me and Sykes all we worked on is every time he throws a jab, step out of range a little bit because he has to reset. and then step out of range a second time, and then was about to throw that jab again, beat him to the shot, but don't counter the jab, beat the jab, beat him to the shot, and you could see Sykes doing it. And then another thing that we did with Crawler, which I'd seen him hit with his shot before, because if you remember, he got beat by Yusuf Alamidi, and Yusuf Alamidi was in the same stable as us. He used to train over at Linthwaite at Chris Hassan's gym. And I always remember Emmanuel Stewart always said, whenever you want to throw a right hook, because a right hook's a telegraph shot, or a long right uppercut, not a short right uppercut inside, a long right uppercut, jab to the eyes and delay it. And Emmanuel Stewart, and I read that, and he always says, jab to the eyes, temporary blind them, and throw the right hook, or throw the looping right hook, or the long right uppercut. And we did that with Crawler, because I'd seen Yusuf Alamidi get away with that. So there were two things that we did against Crawler, and Gary kept catching him and catching him and catching him and catching him, and Crawler never figured it out. And it was just everybody has patterns, and that's where Floyd Mayweather was just such a amazing fighter, because I studied Mayweather so many times. He didn't have any patterns. He wouldn't do things a certain way, and that's why I know Larry Holmes was shot, but Mike Tyson knew that Holmes was susceptible to right hands over the top, not straight right hands. Holmes wasn't susceptible to a straight right hand. He knew Holmes would go clockwise, and if he just threw that right hand over the top, Larry Holmes throughout his career, he got dropped by Ronaldo Snipes and then
Shavers.
Same shot overhand right. He got hurt by Mike Weaver with the same shot, the overhand right. Holmes was really good at defending on his right side and defending left hooks, but he was really susceptible going clockwise to right hands. And Tyson studied it, and that's always been the part of boxing. I know we've gone off a little bit, but that's been the part of boxing what I always loved, because it's your job to, the last video I said it's not about the coach, but you got to figure out that certain fighters do certain things. Crawler, always brilliant kid, but Gary thought they were hard fights as such, but he thought they were quite easy. He just thought it was quite easy to beat in terms of when he got the likes of, Andy Morris and other guys who were a bit sharper. He struggled with those, but he thought Crawler was easy because he did the same thing. And we would watch it, and then after every round, in the first time they fought, I'd say, right, now switch to the eye jab now. And every time I said to Gary, the eye jab, he knew what I meant. Cover his eyes, and you could see Sykes cover his eyes, looping right uppercut. And every time Crawler set up a jab, half a step back. Third time, don't wait for the jab, step in with a combo. And it was just little things like that, Russell. And this is also a controversial statement, but a jab is the most underrated punch in boxing. Everybody says that. But sometimes a jab can be the most overrated. And we've got a minute and a half, and I'm just going to quickly say one of the best pieces of corner advice I've seen in the last couple of years was Joe Gallagher for Natasha Jonas. It was the fight before she was fighting a southpaw. Can't remember who it was, right? And for the first 2 rounds, Jonas is a southpaw. For the first 2 rounds, every time Jonas threw a southpaw jab, her opponent slipped to a right. And Joe Gallagher said to her after the second round, he goes, don't throw the jab, just throw the backhand. He'd figured out that her opponent was dipping to the right. So every time Jonas threw the jab, then the cross came afterwards, she'd already slipped. She'd missed her. And Joe said, don't throw the jab, just throw the backhand. And then every time she started throwing the backhand, she caught her with it. And I thought, that's the stuff I love listening to, and that's the stuff. And we talk about coaches, sometimes being overstated. But that was a really good example for me of a coach who he saw what was going on in the ring. He figured it out, and he knew. And that's in that case when a jab was an overrated punch.
Do you want to click on part 2, kid?
All right, mate.
Good.